The subway station was bustling with hundreds of people rushing to and fro, the sound of announcements constantly ringing mixed with the sound of the train leaving the station. In the midst of the bustling crowd, Yuki, a young university student, hurriedly ran down the stairs to catch the train to school. Busy with her phone in hand, she did not notice that behind her, a golden-haired dog was running after her, Hachiko, the loyal friend she had raised for the past 3 years. The screech of the train rang out as the train doors slowly closed. Yuki stepped onto the train without realizing that Hachiko had stayed behind. The dog barked loudly, scratching hard at the train doors, but it was too late. Its eyes flashed with panic as it watched its owner's figure disappear into the train compartment, leaving it behind on the platform. The people around saw the scene, but no one cared. A lost dog. That was not something too strange in a place like this. Hachiko remained where he was, his eyes looking sadly in the direction of the train that had just gone away. He didn't know that he had just been abandoned, or rather, forgotten in a moment of human indifference. Yuki had no idea that Hachiko had been left behind. She only realized it when she reached the lecture hall. As soon as she sat down, she searched her bag for Hachiko's leash to take him for a walk after school, but the leash was no longer there. Her heart suddenly clenched, memories flashed. Hachiko had followed her to the train station. She stood up in panic, took out her phone, and called her roommate, hoping that Hachiko had found his way home. But her friend's answer made Yuki choke up. "No, Hachiko hasn't come back. Did you bring him to school?" Yuki hurriedly left the lecture hall, catching the first train back to the old station. But when she arrived, Hachiko had disappeared. She ran around the train station, asking around, but no one knew where the dog had gone. Yuki's heart was filled with worry, and tears fell as she thought of Hachiko being lost in a strange corner of the street, not knowing where to go. After hours of fruitless searching, Yuki was forced to return to her dormitory in extreme pain. She told herself that she would return to the train station tomorrow to continue her search. But life doesn't always go as planned. Just a few days later, a major incident struck Yuki's family. Her mother became seriously ill and needed care in the countryside. Yuki was forced to temporarily stop studying to return to take care of her mother, unable to continue searching for Hachiko as she had promised herself. As time passed, Yuki kept thinking about Hachiko. She blamed herself for not being more careful that day, for not returning sooner to look for it. During the long nights alone, she often burst into tears as she remembered the warm days when Hachiko was still by her side, when it ran to greet her after school, when it curled up at her feet on cold winter nights. Every time she returned to the city to continue her studies, she stopped by the train station to look for Hachiko. But so much time had passed, and she had not seen its shadow again. She thought that perhaps someone had taken it in, or that it had wandered off to another place. Little did she know, Hachiko was still there, still waiting for her every day, regardless of the rain, snow, or scorching heat. That day was just the beginning of a 3-year journey of waiting. At first, Hachiko still believed. Every morning, he sat waiting in the same spot, his eyes on the tracks where the last train had taken Yuki away. Every time a train arrived, he would stand up, wagging his tail slightly, looking forward to a familiar figure getting off. But one by one, trains came and went, new passengers hurriedly. None of them were Yuki. The winter of the first year, snow fell heavily, covering the entire station in white. The temperature dropped, the cold winds cut into his skin, but Hachiko still did not give up. He curled up in a small corner to avoid the wind, but his eyes still looked steadfastly at the tracks. The station guards, although initially annoyed, gradually could no longer bear to chase him away. Some sympathetic passengers began to leave food and water, but some also chased him away, not understanding why a dog was so stubbornly sticking around here. The long months of waiting made Hachiko no longer the same. The once shiny golden fur was now frayed and covered in dirt. It was no longer the happy dog that used to run around Yuki, but a lonely shadow among the rushing people. As each day passed, it became more and more emaciated. In the summer, the sweltering heat made Hachiko lose his strength. He could only lie panting on the hot brick floor. In the fall, the cold rains poured down, soaking his fur, his legs trembling from the cold. The second winter, Hachiko had aged visibly. He walked slower, his eyes no longer had the innocent light they once had. People passing by the train station began to notice this change. Some felt sorry, some tried to take Hachiko home, but he never left. A social media post began to spread. telling the story of a loyal dog that still waited for his owner every day. People began to come to the station not just to take the train, but also to see Hachiko. The story of Hachiko touched the hearts of many people. Regular passengers formed a habit. Every time they arrived at the station, they would look at the small corner where Hachiko lay. Some brought old blankets, others left food. The station guard, who had once chased Hachiko away, now quietly left a little water. In the evening. But there were also looks of concern, looks of pity and sorrow. An old woman, after witnessing Hachiko waiting for 3 years, said in tears, "Who is he waiting for? His owner probably will never come back." Hachiko did not understand those words. He only knew that he had to continue waiting. Because to him, Yuki was the world. The story of Hachiko not only spread among regular passengers, but also became a hot topic on social networking forums. A group of animal protection volunteers decided to search for information about Hachiko's owner. They shared his story in the hope of finding Yuki. One day, among the news, Yuki accidentally saw Hachiko's picture in a newspaper article. She was speechless, her heart ached. She could not believe that the dog she had left behind years ago was still waiting for her to return after 3 long years. Yuki felt regretful. Not for a second did she think that Hachiko would continue to wait for her like that. With a choked heart, she decided to take the first train back to the place where Hachiko had waited for her all these years. On the train back to the old station, Yuki sat quietly by the window, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't believe that Hachiko had been waiting for her for the past 3 years. She remembered the old memories, the mornings jogging around the park with Hachiko, the cold evenings when he curled up at her feet in the dormitory. But she also remembered the deep regret of leaving him that day. When the train stopped, Yuki stepped down onto the platform, her eyes immediately scanning everywhere. And then she saw Hachiko. Hachiko was still lying in the familiar position, but he was no longer the healthy, playful dog of 3 years ago. His golden fur had become ragged, his body was thin, his eyes showed signs of aging. But when Yuki approached, his ears perked up slightly. He lifted his head, staring at her. Yuki choked up and slowed down, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. "Hachiko, it's me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Hachiko remained silent for a few seconds, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. But then he suddenly jumped up, staggering towards Yuki. His eyes, which had been blurred by time, suddenly lit up again. He ran to her, nuzzling his head into her legs, his skinny tail wagging strongly as if there had never been a day apart. Yuki knelt down, hugging him tightly, feeling the weak but still vital breath of his loyal friend. "I'm sorry. I kept you waiting for so long." She burst into tears, her arms tightening. Hachiko groaned softly, as if to say that he didn't blame her, he was just happy that she had finally returned. The onlookers removed the passengers and the train station stopped, silently watching the scene. Some who had seen Hachiko waiting every day couldn't hold back their tears. The station guard, who had chased Hachiko away many times, also wiped the corner of his eyes. "He's been waiting for you for 3 years," an old woman standing nearby said, her voice filled with emotion. "Finally, he can rest in peace." A middle-aged man took a picture of that moment and posted it on social media. Within hours, the image of Yuki hugging Hachiko went viral, becoming a touching story about the loyalty of a dog that never forgot its owner. After the moment of reunion, Yuki gently stroked Hachiko, looking into his gentle eyes. "Let's go home, Hachiko. I won't leave you again," she said softly, her eyes shining with determination. But Hachiko suddenly looked up, his eyes filled with hesitation. He looked around the station, the place where he had been attached for 3 years, the place that had become his second home. It looked towards the people who had helped it survive, the strangers who had brought it food and water, the people who had loved it even when its owner was not around. Yuki was silent. She realized the struggle in Hachiko's heart. It loved her, but it also loved the people here. The station guard smiled, bent down, and patted Hachiko's head. "If you take him, take good care of him. He has lived a life full of patience and hope. He deserves to be happy." Yuki took a deep breath, hugging Hachiko once more. "You will come home with me, Hachiko. And this time, I will not keep you waiting." Hachiko groaned softly, then pressed close to Yuki, as if in agreement. She stood up, gently leading Hachiko away. It turned its head once more, looking at the station with a lingering gaze, but then it obediently followed its owner. It had kept its promise. It had waited for Yuki to return, and now it could leave with her in peace. Hachiko had waited too long, but the wait was not in vain. After 3 long years, Hachiko finally returned to Yuki. But life was no longer the same. Yuki's small apartment had changed, and Hachiko himself had changed. He was no longer the playful, energetic dog he once was. Now he was older, slower, and his gentle eyes had experienced too much pain, too many days of lonely waiting. Yuki tried everything to make it up to Hachiko. She spent more time with him, prepared delicious meals, and bought him a new soft bed. But Hachiko was still not used to being away from the train station. At night, he would lie by the window, his eyes staring far away at the road, as if he were still waiting for something. Although Yuki loved him with all her heart, Hachiko could not forget the years he spent at the train station. In the mornings, instead of playing with Yuki like before, he just quietly looked outside, his deep eyes filled with old memories. He was no longer used to the warmth of a home, no longer used to the comfort that Yuki brought. When he went out for a walk, every time he heard the sound of a train passing by, Hachiko would stand still, his ears perked up, looking towards the tracks. He was too familiar with that image, with that sound. The station was not only where he waited, but also his second home. Meeting old friends one day, Yuki decided to bring Hachiko back to the station, which had been his home for the past 3 years. When they stepped down to the platform, familiar people quickly recognized Hachiko. The station guard, who had chased him away many times, now smiled, bent down to pet him. "Look at him, he still remembers this place like it used to be," the old guard said, his eyes filled with emotion. A few familiar passengers came running, bringing food and water as they always did. Hachiko happily wagged his tail, licking the hands of the people who had helped him through the difficult days. Seeing Hachiko clinging to the people at the station, Yuki suddenly understood one thing. He no longer belonged to her alone. He belonged to all the people who had loved him, the people who had witnessed his loyalty and patience. Yuki could not hold back her tears. She knew that Hachiko had a larger family than she had imagined. The years of separation had not only made him old, but also made him a part of this place, a part of the people here. After many days of thinking, Yuki made an important decision. She decided not to keep Hachiko for herself anymore. She would let him go freely to where he belonged. But this time, she would not leave him alone. She asked the station management for permission, along with the help of regular passengers, to set up a small area dedicated to Hachiko. A warm little corner with a clean carpet, a bowl of water always full, and a small sign that read, "Hachiko, the loyal friend of this station." Every day, Yuki still visited it, spent time with it, but no longer to keep it for herself, but to share the love with all those who had taken care of it over the years. Hachiko had found a real home, not just a roof, but people who loved it, a place where it had spent its youth waiting. The story of Hachiko is not only a story of a loyal dog, but also a symbol of love and patience. Passengers who witnessed the touching scene every day at the train station now considered Hachiko an indispensable part of this place. People began calling it the station's loyal friend, and its story spread widely in the media. Many animal protection organizations came to learn about Hachiko. They suggested creating an official area for him, where he could be better cared for, and have a warm place to sleep during the cold winter days. The station management decided to erect a small statue outside the platform to commemorate Hachiko's loyalty, with plaque engraved with the words, "Hachiko, loyal friend of the train station." Yuki continued to spend time taking care of Hachiko every day. She brought him food, groomed his fur, and took him for walks. But most of all, she understood that Hachiko belonged not only to her, but also to all those who loved him. One day, when Yuki visited, she saw a boy sitting next to Hachiko, stroking his shaggy fur. The boy said to her with eyes full of admiration, "Miss, I want to raise a loyal dog like Hachiko." That sentence touched Yuki's heart. Hachiko was more than just a dog. He became an inspiration, an example of love and loyalty. As time passed, Hachiko grew older, but the love people had for him remained unchanged. He still sat patiently by the platform, watching the trains come and go as if waiting for someone, or maybe just to keep up his habit. One day, when Yuki arrived at the station, she saw Hachiko lying quietly on his mat. He no longer wagged his tail or ran to greet her like he usually did. She walked closer, gently placing her hand on his body. Hachiko slept peacefully, forever in the arms of the people who loved him. Hachiko's death left a void in the hearts of many people. The station held a small memorial service for him, where people brought flowers and letters of gratitude for a dog who had touched the hearts of thousands of people. A statue of Hachiko was erected, becoming a popular place to visit. Children were told his story, about loyalty, about unconditional love. Hachiko's story became an eternal symbol of loyalty, not only at the train station but in the hearts of everyone. Hachiko is more than just a dog. He is a symbol of unconditional love, loyalty, and patience. In the hustle and bustle of modern life, we sometimes forget these simple but precious values. Hachiko's story reminds us of the pure love between humans and animals, a love that needs no words, no promises, only loyalty and patience that never change. If this story touches your heart, please share it to spread the beautiful values in life. And if possible, take the time to love and cherish the four-legged friends around you.